You'd expect an MP to be running around in a little Learjet or something, but this thing really is a Mazda 121 with wings. It scares the living hell out of me. Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. It's Nick DeMeadows, State Member for Hinchinbrook MP and also Deputy Leader of the KAP. And this morning, I'm joined with you all to give you the Katters Australian Party recap for the week, where every week we give a weekly wrap-up of exactly what your KAP members of Parliament have been doing across the state and both the political divides, federal and state, of course. Now, this morning, I'd like to talk to you all about what's happening with Bob Katter at the moment and what he's been up to. And Bob this week is he's been busy as usual, and he's been out there kicking a few hornets' nests, as they say. But he went out there and pressed the flesh with Shane Knuth up at the Yungaburra markets earlier this week, last weekend to be factually correct. And he also then attended the Mareeba Multicultural Festival, where Bob got to get out there with Shane and, see the mixing of the cultures in the Mareeba area. And as we know, it takes a multitude of different cultures to build a community. Also, Bob this week took the opportunity right to Qantas and also the ACCC, and he was condemning the proposal from Qantas to take over Alliance Airlines. Now, the reason being is Alliance Airlines has provided not only competition in the market when it comes to regional and rural flights, but also having competition in the market keeps both competitors on their toes. And he's quite worried that without the competition from Alliance, Qantas could really jack the prices up for regional Queensland in places like Mount Isa or even Cloncurry. So something to be concerned at, and something that's on the KAP's radar right now. Bob will also take the opportunity this Sunday after the Cowboys function, of course, in Townsville, to head down to Brisbane and then on to Canberra for Parliament next week, which should be a firecracker, especially after the job summit that happened this week. Now on to what Robbie Katter's been up to. Robbie Katter's been busy, and I've got to show you this video soon, but Robbie has been from one end of the Traeger electorate to the other multitude of times this week, and no wonder the guy's got himself a little four-seater plane. And you'd expect an MP to be running around in a little Learjet or something, but this thing really is a Mazda 121 with wings. It scares the living hell out of me. But that's the kind of commitment this guy has when it comes to getting across, which was one of the biggest electorates in Queensland. Now, when he was in Traeger this week flying around, Robbie went from the Camberwell Drovers Camp Festival and the Drovers Luncheon in Camberwell. He also celebrated the unique Drovers history with the community out there. Robbie also jumped in his plane, I think this is even on the same day, to head to Charters Towers for the Taste of Charters Towers Food Festival. Now, this was where Robbie actually got to judge the senior barbecue competition. I'm sure he had a good time sinking his teeth into some of the sausages and T-bone steaks there to see who was actually crowned the champion. Robbie then jumped in his plane and headed back to Doomadgee for one of Doomadgee's biggest events of the year. That's the Doomadgee Rodeo. Some great footage coming out of that visit, but also he got to have a look at what the young community is doing out there and getting young people into bull riding, steer wrestling, and even a little bit of bareback horse riding. That's the kind of things to keep kids and keep the youth out there interested and engaged, and it's great to see those people getting involved. Also, while Robbie was flying around after he was in Doomadgee, he went a little bit west and headed out to the Hells Gate Roadhouse, where he sat down with a group talking about the Savannah Way and the work that needs to be done on that to improve the roads, but also met with the group Are You Bogged, Mate? Now, this is a great regional Queensland, rural Queensland men's group that's doing a great amount of work in the mental health space for men in regional Queensland. And Are You Bogged, Mate? Check it out on Facebook. Look online, and if you're having some mental health issues, it's not weak to speak. Reach out to the right people that are happy to give you a hand if you're bogged, mate. Then Robbie, of course, joined myself in Brisbane for Parliament this week. He flew down Sunday night, and we were there bright and early Monday morning to start the plan for the attack for the week. While Robbie is in Parliament this week, he raised an issue with the media in a press conference that's pretty dear to his heart. And that's where he wants to see the introduction of something called Zoe's Law. Now, Zoe's Law would be to acknowledge that the unborn child, a child that's still in the womb of a mother, if that child was injured or killed during a criminal event or criminal act, that child would be actually considered a human and a full whole human being when it comes to prosecution. So if the mother and child died, that person would be prosecuted for the death of two people, not one. Like I said, a very dear thing to Robbie's heart. The KAP values human life, and it doesn't matter if it's in the womb or someone that's been born. Now, this would also mirror the legislation that's in New South Wales. So we're not going over new ground, we're just saying we should be aligning with other states when it comes to common sense legislation. Robbie also got an opportunity in Parliament this week to debate his private members bill. Now, the KAP is a strong advocate of not only wild-caught seafood here in Queensland, but also very proud of our sea farm seafood. Now, Robbie's labelling legislation would ensure that all seafood that's served at cafes, bars and restaurants would have a little eye on the menu, and that little eye on the menu would indicate whether the seafood you're about to eat is imported, and if it doesn't have the eye, it's obviously Australian, caught, wild or grown seafood. Now, this debate is something that heated up the Parliament, and unfortunately it seems that the Labor Party will vote against this. We have got the support of the crossbench so far and the LNP, but we'll see how this goes. Check out this video.
Well, State Parliament is tonight debating on whether cafes and restaurants should be forced to disclose where their seafood comes from. Qatar's Australian Party says customers should know where their fish or fresh prawns were caught. If legislated, outlets that don't disclose the origin of their catch could be fined $700.
At the moment, as it stands, you can be buying fish that's labelled barramundi in the shop, and it can be Asian sea bass from the Mekong Delta, which is one of the most polluted rivers in the world, and that can still be labelled something else in the seafood restaurant, pub, fish and chip shop.
While Robbie is in Parliament this week, he used his important question during question time on Wednesday to ask the Premier a question, and funnily enough, she was there this week. She didn't miss question time for this one, and Robbie shot the real questions at her. The reality is we've got problems with youth crime across Queensland, but no more exacerbated than in Mount Isa right now. And he asked the Premier to step in the absence of the inactions of her ministers. Will she step in to give something another try to try and fix youth crime? And Robbie's suggestion was to introduce, relocation sentencing as a trial. And she failed once again to answer that question.
Well, I've come out on Sunday after 3 days, been away to report of kids trashing the Island BMX Club, hundreds of hours of volunteers building this up over the years. Now will severely compromise the future of the club because of these kids running unchecked. The government doesn't care about any of this youth crime. They've proven that. Townsville, Cairns, Northwest, doesn't matter whether you're Liberal, Labor or KAP in these seats, they just don't care because it's up in the north away for them. We've got to do something about that, and I'll be taking the gloves off this week in Parliament.
Ladies and gentlemen, while you're tuned in to KAP's recap, I must remind you, if you're on YouTube right now, please hit subscribe. If you're seeing this for the first time on Facebook, give our Facebook or Instagram pages a follow. Shane Knuth, one of the hardest working politicians in Queensland. You probably won't find a guy that gets to more places than him. Only second to Robbie Katter, of course. Now, Shane spent some time with Bob Katter up in the Hill electorate this week, and they spent some time at the Yungaburra markets. Now, the Yungaburra markets, if you haven't been up there before, you've got to go check it out. There's everything from, you could go home with a goose to a punnet of strawberries or a jar of honey. There's literally something for everyone. If your wife loves going to see the markets, or if you like getting out there to see those sorts of things, the Yungaburra markets are an absolute must. It was also a good chance for Shane while he was up there in the Hill electorate to go to the book fair on Sunday and mingle with some of the book enthusiasts of the Hill electorate. And it was great for him to actually catch up with a couple of authors and get some photos of them. While Shane was also running around the Atherton area, which is in the Hill electorate, he got an opportunity to pull into the Atherton International Club to officially open their brand new renovations. Now, the place looks amazing, and I'm sure the renovations will serve the community and the association there for years to come. Now, anyone that knows Bob Katter and Shane Knuth, you'll know that they love their rugby league. And while Bob was in town, they couldn't miss the opportunity to head out to the Atherton football grounds to watch the Atherton Roosters take on the Cairns Brothers in the far northern NRL competition. Now, I'm not sure who won, but I'll always say I'm sure rugby league was the winner out of this day. Before Shane then took off to Brisbane this week for Parliament, he then shot down to Malanda, the dairy farming heartland of his community. That part of the Hill electorate has some of the best milk in Australia coming out of those hills. And it was great for Shane to get a chance to go and chat with some of those farmers, catch up with his constituents there before heading down to Brisbane for what would be the battle in Parliament this week. While Shane was in Parliament this week, he took on a number of hyper-local issues that are really affecting people, not only in his electorate, but up in the Cape. And one thing that Shane's very passionate about right now is the shooting of cattle in Cape York. Now, some of these areas that are now national parks have got the attention of the state government. And, there's areas where cattle has been allowed to wander and graze in these areas before coming national parks. And now, all of a sudden, the state government has this bed bug where they want these cattle out. Now, these are a very reliable and very valuable resource right now. You just got to go into the market and check out what a steer or a beast is worth at the moment. You're looking at $3,000-4,000 a beast in some cases. Now, Shane's been lobbying not only Department of Environment and Science, but also the Minister as well, Megan Scanlon, to make sure that not only are we not wasting this resource, but making sure that farmers are able to get their cattle out in time before an aerial shoot, but also opportunities, making sure opportunities are opened up for some of the traditional owners in the area to actually try and get some of these cattle out. While Shane Knuth was in Brisbane this week, he had the Mayor from the Cassowary Coast, Mark Nolan, and his team travel down to talk to the Minister for Transport and Main Roads, Mark Bailey, around finalising funding for the design of the Curramine Beach boat ramp. Now, this design would allow better access for marine access in the Hill electorate, and it's something that Shane Knuth and I know Mark Nolan have been working on for some time. Now, once again, it's also been a busy week for myself, and you're probably sick of hearing me say the word busy, but I just can't find any way else to describe it. It's like busy as an emotion sometimes. Seafood labelling was one of the pieces of legislation that I spoke on quite passionately in Parliament this week, and just to get people's head around this, 70 to 60% of all seafood that's served up here in Australia is imported. So it stands to reason when you go to a cafe or restaurant and you want to know where your seafood comes from, shouldn't it be labelled? I know the retail sector has to do that, so if you're down at your local fishmonger or Coles or Woolworths, they need to label where that seafood comes from. Shouldn't you think that cafes and restaurants should be affording consumers that type of choice as well? That's why I was passionate about this. Check out this video.
KAP is just going to drag some common sense legislation into this House for 5 seconds. The KAP and the member for Traeger has done a lot of work with the seafood industry and actually brought two parts of the seafood industry together to agree on something here. Wild caught seafood industry and farm seafood industry working together. Usually they are a little bit of loggerheads, but working together for the common good of consumer confidence when it comes to seafood in Queensland and Australia. Just get this through everyone's head right now, Mr. Speaker. Get this through everyone's head. We are a net importer of seafood in Australia. 60 to 70% of the seafood that each and every one of you eat right now comes from somewhere other than Australia. Coming out of Vietnam, coming out of Indonesia, and some of the most substandard practices of farming seafood on the planet. The consumer should be updated on exactly where their seafood is coming from. So if you're happy to stick that stuff in your mouth,
Order,
great.
members.
Great, Mr. Speaker. If they're happy to do that, that's great. But consumers should have the chance to know when they're at a restaurant or cafe, when they're about to put that fork of barramundi in their mouth, whether it came from a Queensland or Australian growing barramundi farm or out of the Indonesian farms.
Also this week, we had the Inspector of Detention Services Bill debated, and we, from the KAP, we would like to see more transparency on how our detention centres, our youth detention centres and adult maximum security and farm detention centres are actually run. But a part of that is we don't want to just protect those inmates in there. We want to make sure that the staff are protected as well. And the bill that I spoke to doesn't actually do that. Now, we've been contacted by a number of people from the Cleveland Bay Detention Centre, for example, and the atrocities that they go through on a daily basis is something that the state government needs to address. They're not being heard, these staff members, when they go to their union and also their supervisors, and it seems to be continuing to fall on deaf ears. So off the back of this bill, I made sure that the Parliament heard me reaffirm my call for a full-blown inquiry into our detention centres across Queensland, because if we're going to fix some of these problems, we need to hear both sides of the story. I also got a chance to ask a question on notice, which we'll wait for the written response from the Minister, on the amount of money that's actually been generated through pastoral leases over the last 5 years, and how much money has actually been put back into developing better services for when it comes to invoicing and billing. We've had a number of constituents contact us, quite concerned that we haven't moved forward and modernised the way that the billing service happens. Now, you need to remember a lot of these pastoral leases are in regional Queensland where snail mail could take weeks to get out there, and you may actually have 4 to 5 different letters coming through for different leases over your property holdings. Now, we're just asking if that system can be updated so that it can go half digital or still have the optional for paper mail-outs. Another burning issue and another hyper-local issue in the Hinchinbrook electorate is down at Bushland Beach. We've had negative reports from constituents that live in the area, troubled about the rumours of the Queensland Government and the Department of Housing actually purchasing housing for Housing Commission houses. Now, I'm not against social housing. I know that we need more of that. But the reality is it needs to be done in consultation with the community and those residents that live in that area. Because you need to understand that most people that live in public housing are quite a pleasure to live next door to, but there's a small percentage of those that for some reason the Department of Housing fails to manage. And unfortunately, with the laws in Queensland right now, it's even difficult for QPS to come down and sort out some of those neighbourly disputes. So we need to be quite mindful of not only making sure that we have enough public housing, but also making sure that the right people are going into the right areas, and also that those people that live in those areas and have worked hard to buy a block in that street aren't adversely affected. And that's what proper consultation is all about. Unfortunately, when I asked the Minister this question this week, like I have been for the last 6 weeks via correspondence backwards and forwards from her office, she was unable to answer, which is disappointing.
Residents in Bushland Beach are concerned with their safety, wellbeing and property values should 121 Daintree Drive be purchased by the Department of Housing. Recent requests to your office to clarify this potential purchase have gone unanswered. Minister, has the property been purchased without consultation with residents?
Also this weekend, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be tied up in a number of community events across the Townsville region. Tonight I'll be shooting down to the Townsville Helicopters hangar to attend the Chamber of Commerce ball, which happens once a year. Tomorrow night I'll have a wedding in Townsville, so you never know, you might see me on Flinders Street, hopefully staying out of the Mad Cow. And then thirdly, on Sunday, you'll see us at the Cowboys Ball, their breakup function for the year, where we'll be able to celebrate the wins, the losses, the good, the bad of the whole season. And hopefully the Cowboys have a win this Saturday night. We have plenty of reason to celebrate on Sunday. But until next week, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish us all a great weekend. Thanks a lot for following us for another week. Thanks for the support, and look forward to catching up in a week's time. Cheers.